Roughly 26 years from its original inception, Evangelion is finally drawn to a close, and once more treated its legions of followers to a thoroughly polarising, confusing, and somewhat pretentious ending. So nothing new there, right? For today's review, I'll be attempting, at least, to convey my own feelings on this film and why it's so very conflicting for so many. With that said, there is a little cause for a full spoiler-free section. As such, please take the following paragraphs as my general opinion if you haven't yet seen the movie series. 3.0 plus 1.0 will put bluntly not in all but the outlying cases change your opinion on the rebuilds. If you loved the OG Eva and hated the reboot so far, then in all likelihood you will get very little from this. The plot only gets more convoluted, the characters are near non-existent in anything but a meta sense, there is no subtlety in the deliverance of its most important messages, and compared to the previous ending of EOE, it's simply less interesting in terms of production. However, if you already like the rebuilds, or you stand on the fence about Eva in general, then it would appear that you may well love this film. With an at times Ghibli aesthetic and musical score, a heartwarming tale of overcoming adversity, depression and PTSD, and a cast of all favourites back for one last bombastic hurrah, you may well find yourself thanking Anno & Co. while decreeing you finally come to the end of your Eva journey. As such, whether you should or shouldn't watch this movie depends. If you've seen none of Eva, then it's imperative you start with the original, preferably the definitive director's cut and not the Netflix version for the optimal experience, including, of course, the superb episodes 25 and 26 and the final movie of End of Evangelion. After this point, or if you've already seen to that, you're presented with a choice. If you love the original Eva deeply, relate to the characters and their struggles, or its messages and themes about loving oneself and finding happiness in the mundane, then chances are the rebuilds may well not be your time. Worth your time. I know I'd much rather go back and use the time to rewatch an Eva 95 again, because at its heart, the rebuilds are the expression of a man 20 years wiser. A man who I don't think could write NG or EOE anymore, not because he's necessarily lost his touch, but because he's moved on, and his new work isn't so many current sensibilities, put lightly. Alternatively, if you're mixed about the originals, or fail to empathise with it, to get it, as Gigguk described in his video on the subject, then the reboots are seemingly tailor-made for you. The number of people I've witnessed across the social medias thanking Anno/Eva for bringing them immense joy and gratitude is astounding. And even the mal-scoring, tickle as those are, is overwhelmingly positive in these first few weeks. Put simply, if you've already watched the first 3 reboots, you may as well finish it off, and if you've yet to start any of them, but on some level are still seeking a sense of closure from this franchise, then Reboot 4 should certainly suffice. Now then, spoilers ahoy. This section will contain spoilers for all of the Evangelion animes. Is the message now just to go outside and wait for a faultless waifu to literally fall from the sky? I won't pretend that this will be one of my more composed reviews, but lightly, this film kind of broke me in an entirely different way to how End of Eva did. For a couple of days I couldn't process it immediately because I was just so conflicted on what to think. I've wavered between some days of hating the film before hearing a positive review and mellowing out. My potential scores for it have varied between a 5 to a 7 and a 10 at times, to where I now don't believe it is even scoreable at this present moment. My current score on Mel is simply there because you can't post reviews without having a number. By conventional means, or even if I should want to score this in the first place, every element has me almost paranoid, in that we as Eva fans are used to analysing each and every frame to get different meanings from a moment or a scene, but equally, often enough the message of Eva is quite simple. So then, let's start there. What is 3.0 plus 1.0's message? The prior 2 animated endings conveyed that we should learn to love ourselves before trying to force others to love us, and that anywhere could be heaven. For all the robots, Christian iconography and pseudo-psychology, it's those simple messages that we could all hold, which it ultimately boiled down to. Then we have the new end, which is one, if is feeling precocious, could be described as go outside and touch some grass. Now, to be fair, many reasonably interpret EOE to mean this too. The difference is the delivery. 4.0 makes it very clear that Shinji breaks free of an infinite time loop, in large part because of Mari, an outsider with no hang-ups and a more realistic, anti-escapist worldview, was there, essentially. Obviously, this isn't meant to be literal, but she very much so drops into his life via a Kanji-issued parachute to save him and everyone else from infinite turmoil. So then what? As soon as your waifu for life turns up, your problems will cease? Your prior fake waifus will literally explode into LCL in front of your eyes or hook up with others? Your PTSD will fade in between scene transitions and you'll suddenly become a confident Chad with the ability to talk your gay alien best friend and stubborn father into a happy ending? Huh? This is especially strange when you learn that Anno's real-life wife has struggled with her own anxieties, to which Anno was able to help her through due to his own experiences. Ergo, the idea that no one is perfect and we all need to help one another. That implies Mari isn't his wife, stand-in, but then that would just make her a Mary Sue waifu, which is arguably even worse than a wife stand-in. Furthermore, what does this suggest for the original? Now that hopeful, optimistic dream world of smiling, clapping faces is just a stopping point, one point in the loop, inconsequential. Equally, the smallest shred of light in the utmost of oppressive darkness, as shown at the end of EOE when Asuka strokes Shinji's face, is now what exactly? What does that mean to them, to Anno, to Asuka, to us? Asuka's mind actually takes her back to that place during the 4.0 film antimatter world section, either implying it's her happy place bearing incredible importance to her, or rather more, that it represents her dark and ending torment. But when was it ever meant to mean that in the original? We'll come back to this, and I really don't want to sound hyperbolic or dismissive, but the thing that makes this so conflicting is that yes, this works as Anno's expression of his feelings towards Ava and life at Studio Ghibli and so on, but as a narrative, it's an absolute complete disaster. So many have found this amazingly conclusive, and I'm happy for them, but I've never felt more empty after an Ava ending, and that's an unfortunate outcome. Why does nothing make sense? We will come back to this meta element and personal feelings presently, but for now I'd like to talk on a few other problems I had with this as an actual piece of media, as a product per se. The movie, similar to 3.0, goes for a rule of cool approach to the visuals, where EOE had one well thought out, revolutionarily animated and dynamically choreographed robot battle that still blows your mind to this day, well, being in itself the culmination of a character's journey and development arc, with impeccably high stakes for not just her, but essentially the whole cast and even the universe. 3.0 plus 1.0 has 4, or more, battles, depending on how you count them, that are all meh. There's no weight to anything. If they die, why should we care? I've seen Rey die half a dozen times at this stage, not counting rewatches. This isn't the Asuka from the original anymore, with the new one having fuck all development in her own right, which could be a deliberate meta thing, but we'll get there. So why should I care about her? And Mari is just vague. On the opposing side of the conflict, we have an infinite, unspecified number of enemy mechs, which vary from genetic evil CGI robots with straight-up spooky Halloween skull faces to Adam's vessels, piloted by more Rays, maybe? And finally, Fuyutsuki's personal armada of man-made angels, as seen in the third film as well. It makes very little sense. The Paris battle is fanbait and nothing more. Why Masato would go there without recovering her pilots, or at least sending a separate team to secure them, is dumb. After all, Gendo's not exactly far away from them. How they were able to attach that rig to Unit 8 is bizarre, but further, said rig works far better than any other weapon we've ever seen, with conventional chain guns apparently now capable of obliterating mass production angels, all while moving around like a scout from Attack on Titan. And then throwing the Eiffel Tower because it got people hyped and it referenced Nadia or something. This first battle sets up the movie to fail from a tension standpoint. No one dies, and one whole faction is unmanned and inhuman. There's no regard for physics, a constant focus on over-the-top fan service of the girls, and a seemingly endless supply of both allied resources and enemy units. Why should anyone care about the subsequent battles after watching this one, even if it is the best looking in the film? After that, you get the joys of 2 battle sequences that boil down to poor references to other Gainax products and Space Battleship Yamato, which forego all sense of reality and become little more than visual white noise. Almost like a knockoff Gurren Lagann, where the makers didn't understand what made the fights in that show work in the first place. Finally, we end off with just more pointless fan-wanking. When we get to see Shinji and Gendo actually battle it out in their stupid giant robots, it's just all really, really dumb. You may well enjoy it for the pointless, bombastic, fun quality, but none of the battles hold any true merit. Most of them look above average, if you can ignore the sometimes atrocious 3D renders and physics. I love seeing Unit 1 get ragdolled, and no narrative reason is a good enough excuse for how bad the CGI looked in that last battle sequence. But they're pointless. There's no real stakes, nothing all that surprising or interesting. Asuka gets to Unit 13, and it's a trap. Wow, shocker. And there was me expecting it to be mission complete. Right. Does no one remember how Shinji made it to the surface of the Geofront in EOE just in time not to save Asuka? Or how Rei 2 really does get critically injured fighting the Angel with the M2 mine during the TV show? Spurring on further development for the whole cast and dramatically raising all the stakes? There's nothing here like that. And while that doesn't necessarily need to be, it makes the fights also extremely forgettable. Getting back to the heading, they're where the movie often makes the least sense. Who made all the MPVs, the MPAs, and Vessels of Adams? Fuyutsuki? All by himself? All of them? Or did they all get created from human souls during one of the many Shinji, possibly, instigated impacts? If so, how are they controlled? In EOE, you might need to look for the answers. They were always there somewhere. The Kaoru dummy plugs, like the established Ray plugs in the show before them, were used to control the MPVs. There is nothing like that here, just weird, remarkably easy to kill skullface people. I already mentioned how the time loop stuff sheds a strange new light on the original duo of endings, essentially framing them as the bad ends, but there's more issues to it than that. Gendo maybe implies that the first two ends are actively affecting the present rebuild world, and that they purified the oceans, hence why they're red, and then the souls of the earth, or the earth, or I don't know. Waifutsky alluded to Mari not only being his age, but actually some form of ancient being who presumably ages backwards, considering how much younger she looked compared to the photo present in 3 or 4, or was that Oscar's mom, not Mari? Who knows? What did that tell us about Mari, or the story at large, and why she was needed other than marketing to give Anno a wife insert in the last film? The heck was Seilei's deal in this continuity? Were they also ancient beings, as hinted to in the third film with the brain-imprinted monoliths? Is Mari of the same breed as the Seilei rocks? Are Seilei kept alive when LCL struck the curse of Ava? And were they ever even humans this time around? Can we please all address how little narrative there barely... Sorry. Can we all please address what little narrative that there is barely even functions without prior franchise knowledge? In the original timeline, it took the combined and pooled resources and personnel of all remaining countries in the world after the second impact to make just the Ava series and Nerve, with the rest of the world actively in famine and technological decline, as shown in the likes of Jet Alone and Fuyutsuki - Nerve's origin episodes. In Rebuild, Nerve alone is making space battleships and dozens of subservient Avas and MPAs. 14 years is not long enough for that technology to have been studied by just 2 dudes, nor for them to have constructed all this. Even if some of that was explained by the time skip, the technology doesn't make sense, and it doesn't have to, but world building is important. And of course, how could I not mention, what's that? The Curse of Ava really was just a meta pontification with 0 story ramifications? Great. The point I'm getting at here is that while the original could sometimes seem overly complex or complicated and confusing, a rewatch or explanation was always there. Part of what made Ava so great was that it delivered that deeply personal and kind message about loving oneself, while still having some of the most brilliant and detailed world building in sci-fi to date, certainly for Japan. It could do both, and while I'm sure people will gradually explain away more and more of 4.0, it's just messy, and I'm not even sure how much of that is by design. Ultimately speaking, the YouTuber Intimate O posted a video about a week ago, where one of his theories for the film's ending was essentially that it was all a dream, that the stories and characters are all just the imaginary delusions of a man struggling with depression, that the ending is him finally letting go of them while he sits waiting for his partner at the train station. And to be honest, that seems as logical an explanation as any. So was that it? Was it all just a dream? Did the fantasy finally end? Is that really what we wanted? According to the response, I guess so. Should I view this as an individual property or part of the greater whole? From parallel imagery to time loops and actual shown footage of the original show and earlier movies, 4.0 seems highly intent on being seen as part of something larger, as being viewed as an end to, well, all of Evangelion. But if that's the case, new issues arise. I don't just mean what I've already addressed about changing the old endings to being bad, stroke pointless either. I don't like most essays that compare the objectives of anime to one another, for while I believe greatly that objectivity can be a very valuable tool that I myself try to make a large deal of use of, most anime are made with different goals and objective aims in mind. I don't compare Michelangelo to Vincent van Gogh. However, if Anno and Co are asking me to see this as one whole, then it struggles even more. I already mentioned how the fights, while above average on their own, utterly pale compared to Oscar versus the MPV's battle, or the assault on Nerve HQ, or most of the TV show, resulting in a very much so quantity over quality effect. There's no score, then there's the score. Objectively speaking, it's brilliant, and yet, does it fit? What If, the new instrumental song, is great, but it ain't Komsu's Todd. Now don't get me wrong, that is just my biased opinion, but rather what I mean is it isn't as memorable or as unique as its forebears. It's not the sort of song that you hear and you think that can only be Ava. Sure, you'd certainly accept it as an Ava song, because it is, but well... As for One Last Kiss, it's a far cry from Cruel Angel's thesis. Is it a bad song? Again, no, not to my taste, but objectively and technically great and fitting for the credits. But will it still be at the top of karaoke bars in a decade's time? I think not. Indeed, if you do a direct comparison, the reboots start to fall apart in an undeniable fashion, to the point where it's sort of a strange idea Anno took, the route of so overtly tying them together. The world building is a bad joke, the characters are like puddles on the side of an Olympic swimming pool that was the original cast, and even the mech designs have gotten to be far more normal, for anime standards at least. I would soon discuss how I can't bring myself to either write off this movie, or score it at all for that matter. It should be said that if this essay solely was intent on just making comparisons between Rebuild 4 and AOE, we'd be looking at little more than a 5 out of 10. Best. Of character, obligatory side quests, and bafflingly shallow or fourth wall breaking mains. With characters, let's quickly go over the sidecast first. A lot of the time they feel intended as tools rather than people. Actually, I guess that's more like all of the time. The more prevalent sides, like Ritsuko, make references to their past lives but with no explanation. After all, I have no reason to believe Gendo slept with her or her mother in this timeline, nor that she holds any resentment towards him. That is until she repeatedly shoots him. Where did that come from? Are we just grifting off past developments now? Is it just a fun reference? Does she remember the past? Her lines actually kind of imply it. If this Ritsuko has been in a relationship with Gendo, then it's ridiculous that she'd have gone off with Misato. After all, her character was all about the cycle of abuse. She would have stayed with Nerve even if it meant losing Misato and Maya and everyone. Of that I feel very sure. That's the point of her, which in turn might help make some things a little more reasonable. You know, how they made all the new Avas. But instead we get yet another pointless fanservice moment with no build-up or setup. And then there's Poor Fuyutsuki. Myself and my brother hoped that he'd change sides during the film, come riding in atop the back of Jet alone to save the kids in their final hour of need. Unfortunately, that idea was passed on. We get no explanation to his purposes, nothing to suggest he wanted to see Yui again, bar a single line of dialogue across 4 films, and some very minor allusions in film tree which could just be seen as him reminiscing for Shinji's sake. There's no backstory, motives, relationships with the rest of the cast, nothing. He's just used to remind us that people turn into LCL during instrumentality, and as a mouthpiece for Anno to leave cryptic hints about Mari. That's it. Well, I guess he is the ultimate wingman, because goddamn does that man hustle. Even if he didn't make the battleships in AV Units 6 to 13, but then who did? He pilots Nerve, all the MPVs, the MPAs, and 3 battleships all by his lonesome. That's pretty darn impressive for a man of his age. A real silver fox is our best boy. Kaji, I'm not entirely sure of. Because the world appears to be the reset, so much for the not resetting and having to live with the consequences of your actions, when not being able to reset it better reinforce the idea of moving on from escapism in the past. Guess that might have been too sad or upsetting. Since it could have all been a dream, it is possible he finally gets to be with Misato and have a child of his own. He'd be a great dad, no doubt, but that's kind of it. It sort of seemed hinted to that Kaoru and him had past beef, either because of him stopping Kaoru, or maybe Shinji during a possible third impact, or maybe Kaoru was the one who shot him all the way back in NGE. Who knows? Who cares anymore at this point? No arc, no development, no presence even. The same goes for Best Girl Maya and the 2 original bridge officers, who apparently are so minor that Mal doesn't even list their names for this film, and as such I won't either. Our boys get a fist bump scene and some classic gawking at reports and the goings on in the moment. That's it, lads. Maya has implied development. Ritsuko has seemingly decided as the XO of the ship to never do any work, so Maya is left to do it all in both Paris and when making the bogus extra spear, alluding to her development into a more rounded and capable person. Gone are the days of her screaming at the insides of an Ava. Now she relishes in pressured situations, so I guess that's nice. No resolution for her whole thing with Ritsuko though. Not even a real apprentice becoming the master sort of line, or acknowledgement of a past crush, or some such on the woman. Still, probably the best done and most consistent character, if underwhelming. Lastly on the sidecast we have the true Anno mouthpieces, Sakura, Toji's sister, Midoriya, the pink-haired girl, and the OG high school cast, all grown up. Everyone say, "Ah, now." Sakura and Midoriya are used to represent the audience, almost, though I don't think intentionally, to a mocking degree. Sakura is meant to be those of us who want the best for Shinji, but still see him as a genocidal bastard. Those of us who are conflicted and on the fence about the rebuilds. Meanwhile, Midoriya is meant to be the cynical part of the audience. She decrees that Misato and Ritsuko are stupid to trust Shinji, and that Asuka and Mari are dumb to bring Shinji back to the ship in the first place, and that Shinji deserves to pay for the 2+ separate attempted and pretty successful war crimes to the tune of near total human genocide. I think the idea is that once they finally give up and make way for Shinji, we as the audience are also meant to give up and just embrace the emotional side of the film, while ignoring the logical side. This is shown most clearly by having Sakura, the moderate confused fan, shoot and accidentally hit Misato. Her reluctance to change literally only hurts the franchise more, rather than letting it move on. There's also Toji and Co, who represent Anno speaking directly to us about what he sees as a better way of living. They're his image of humanity at its best, and he uses the blank version of Rei tentative Ayanami as a conduit through which to have simple but hardy folk characters explain in the smallest terms possible the joys of daily basic livelihoods, kindness, and community. It's kind of nice. I don't hate it, and it's somewhat more earned, well, than pretty much anything else in the film. It would have helped if, they'd actually gone back to this location at the end, if the credits showed them struggling, but still rebuilding, humanity persevering against it all, and hope shining. As it stands, it feels a little pointless and preachy, considering its considerable screen time but remarkably small relevance. I mean, we see the escape pods somehow go the whole way from Antarctica back to there, but then there's no more after that. With that said, the village scenes are by far the best animated and looking in the anime, and some of the best stills and compositions I've ever seen, easily matching the likes of Studio Ghibli, being a wallpaper second experience and a large point contributing to the overall score I gave for the art style / animation sections metric. Goat Jesus and a couple others have posited that some of the direction here is actually a bit rough, but I didn't notice it myself, though I did feel the scenes dragged at times, so who knows. The main cast is where the real issues lie. Some are easy to talk about, in that they're shamelessly dumbed down, but others have been made far more complex or meta to mixed effects. Rei is the easiest talking point, despite being 3 different people. Putting aside the inconsistency and the fact that there is now multiple Rei consciousnesses, souls, moving around at once, unless the implication is Rei Q and the Adams vessel Reis are all truly blank with no souls. But then, why would you ever need a soul? Why not just have all the Ava's pilots be Reis? Anyway, her character is exceedingly disappointing. It turns out Shinji did save Rei, too. She spends 14 years ghost piloting Ava Unit 1, I think it's Unit 1, before finally meeting up with Shinji. How does she react? She asks to stay with him. He says, "Begone, Fosh," and she's like, "Sure, that's it, no joke, that's all, folks. Because there's a village out there awaiting." She just leaves. The giant uncanny valley Rei head is a nice idea and concept, and development of the original EOE idea, but is just garbage and completely kills those scenes and should have been taken out long before post-production. Meanwhile, Rei Q just repeats the arc we've already seen at least twice now. Learns to love, then dies. Utterly pointless and irrelevant. As for Quantum Rei, she doesn't even show up or receive any extra development. So really it just ends for roll 3. Goodbye, Rei, I guess. Misato's here. She got shot again, but lives it. Then kamikazes for questionable reasons, because, purely the one that has an autopilot, and heck, Maya could probably just program one on the spot. I mean, what does it actually say about her character that she insists on going down with her ship for Shinji's sake, knowing she'll make him and her own son orphans for no reason? It's bizarre. Anyway, all of which just seems to make her a great reference to other great mentors, namely the other Misato, who died for good reason and with an impact that can still make grown men tear up all these years later. Her death and getting shot feels so arbitrary that even the anime acknowledges it and pretty much makes no fanfare for them, as if it knows they're simply token gestures that are going to be shortly reset. There's also her new son. This will apply more to Gendo's character, but why exactly did we need this level of dumbing down? Am I seriously to believe that people watching the original EOE and NG didn't put together the idea that Misato feels immense guilt for being a shit mom figure for Shinji? The introduction of her son clearly serves no purpose other than to reinforce what a bad mom she is and show her remorse. It's arbitrary and unneeded. Heck, Kaji doesn't even mention the kid when he walks off with Kaoru in the Antiverse. And don't say he doesn't know about the kid. He presumably is being formed from Shinji's mind, which is one that has seen and talked with the son. Why wouldn't he mention him if he has any relevance to the plot? If they intend to do anything with that plot addition. Furthermore, she's clearly never a match for Gendo because he's not playing the same game as she is. You can say her creating a spear and finally getting her crew out alive are evidence of her surpassing the old man, becoming more than just his pawn, but what if that wasn't conveyed by her completely fucking up his plan by helping Shinji get in the robot in EOE, and later her cross being a large part of what gave him the resolve to keep on living? What new thing has been said here, or old concept has been reinvigorated in a vaguely fateful way here? Meanwhile, I can say with certainty that I hate everything they do again, though. First, I could understand someone missing it until a rewatch or explanation review video. But the fact that Gendo was just an oldest Shinji longing for his deceased wife was not hard to work out. We did not need a literal montage of Gendo explaining how he was a sad, lonely kid, and for the love of all things holy, who okayed that flaming shot of young Gendo being just Shinji with glasses? I burst out laughing at the sheer audacity and bluntness of it. And obviously, it can't be taken as what he actually looked like, unless the time loop shenanigans are even more complicated than we think, because no father and son look identical. That's stupid. No, rather, we're subjugated to 10 minutes of him essentially explaining his not-so-evil plan and motives. Yeah, and? Also, why does him fusing with an angel cause his face to lose its eyes when Ritsuko shoots him? Imagery-wise, it suggests he's lost his soul in pursuit of Yui, but then he's immediately infinitely more honest with us as the audience and Shinji than he's ever been before. And after that, he finally gets to be reunited with Yui in the jankiest and most cringeworthy scene of the year, where they stab all the Avas, including Unit 2's variables and one of the Adams vessels. So why in God's name would this be the version of Gendo with no soul? But actually speaking, shouldn't his fusing with an angel cause him to regenerate, not just sit there eyeless? What even is Gendo in this film? Before the film, I saw a joke about what it would be like to have Shinji actually confront or even fight his father. And it was as bad as I'd feared. The two fighting like this was, and still isn't, the point. Sure, it's a nice idea, they could have a chat, but the stupid robot battle? Even if you make it clear it's an in-universe farce, you're still making it a showpiece. The tragedy of OG Gendo is that he never talks to his son. Now, having him finally realise how dumb he's been could work. If a single bit of build-up was done for it, but it wasn't. Shinji's just suddenly ready, and a version of Gendo that, to me at least, seems like the most unequivocally corrupt and desperate to date, decides to be amicable and reasonable all of a sudden. It's just downright cheap and lazy. It's bad writing. I already mentioned some of Mari's faults, like how the flashbacks imply she was the one that got Shinji's parents together, making her just such a Mary Sue, and weakening that dynamic so much that... But there's also her and Asuka. They're implied to have a close bond from the time skip and whatnot, but ultimately nothing comes of it. Now, we're talking about their characters, and if I'm feeling generous, the reason Mari looks out for Asuka and calls her princess could be down to one of two reasons. One, the photograph of Mari and the original Gaharen-kun and Asuka's mother, if those are, well, it's unclear, could mean that Mari views Asuka in a motherly or older sisterly capacity. Alternatively, Asuka is now a clone, apparently, presumably one of her seemingly deceased mother, so it's possible that's why Mari holds a connection to her. That might even explain how she can pilot Unit 2 in the second rebuild film, maybe. Though, what that means for Units 3 to 13, especially 5 and 8, is anybody's guess. If Mari really is some alien being like the angels, maybe that's why. Also, I find it amusing that Mal doesn't even list Mari as a main character. Whatever the case may be, neither her or Asuka are really used to say anything of interest that we haven't already covered. Asuka being a clone only really seems to complicate everything further than it was already the case. But the only real benefit being how it draws her parallels closer to Rei, but for what purpose or to what end I'm yet to settle on. The only other take being, to me anyway, that Asuka was made a clone to emphasise her being a sort of living doll, an icon of the fandom or some such meta-nonsense. But again, they don't really do anything at all that interesting or new with the concept. And how does it affect the narrative? The meta is not the story, or is it? Finally, you're probably expecting a not-so-short segment on Shinji Ikari, but what can you really say? In the second rebuild, it seemed like we were going for a more forthright and confident Shinji. The same character, but from a different light. Only for the third movie to sort of subvert that by having him fall to the lowest point of all time, with everyone actually hating him like he'd always worried. They had been since NGE and EOE, plus being responsible for causing the actual apocalypse, and all without any sign of the Rei Ayanami he tried to save in the process of the whole mess. Then Kaoru dies. Then he understandably mourns, becomes depressed, but for months, or maybe just weeks, it's unclear, and goes into quiet isolation in some pretty nature, with support from his closest friends, well, except for Kaoru, Kaji, and Miss Sata, too soon, sorry, has begun to rehabilitate. Then Reikyu just explodes right in front of him, at what must be, from his viewpoint, complete random, into a massive puddle of LCL after her suit turns white for some reason. Does he have a PTSD relapse, perhaps? Absolute mental breakdown? No. He just kind of gets over it during a scene transition, and for the rest of the film is absolutely fine. This isn't even coherent writing anymore. The last half, Shinji could exist, and be a really great way to end his character's journey, but under separate circumstances. Again, none of the work is done to get there. He just suddenly becomes an insert character for Anno, that's it. And again, some people have defended this in the podcast on Ava Monkey's channel. I can't remember the YouTuber's name. He's the one who does the Anna cinematography. He talks about how Shinji doesn't get over it because Rei explodes. He gets over it because of the kindness everyone shows him, and they don't hate him, and that is fine. Except in any case of real PTSD or depression, something which Anno famously is known for doing well, it's something like someone's fucking face exploding the exact same way that sparked the whole thing in the first place does not go unnoticed. That should have an effect, but instead Rei Q is never mentioned again, just further emphasizing her pointlessness. Is it me? Is it simply that I'm not ready to move on from Eva? Is this movie quite apparently outside of my actual frame of reference? If you've read down this far, you may think I've been entirely negative towards this film, and indeed I doubt many fans of it, or even moderate watchers, will even bother to come down this far. If anyone, at all for that matter. I dislike the production. I think the story and characters are subpar, and the Team Plus message is overly blunt and literal. Yet, in truth, it's not that simple. The reason I struggle with this film, the reason I've caved in and decided to write a review, despite how many others better than I have already done so and will undoubtedly do so, is because this film feels honest. Not honest in a way I personally like, but not insincere either. It feels like an expression, like art. How can I hate this when it is Eva? What I mean to say is, Anno has always just been writing about himself. He's said as much. Does that mean that, in all likelihood, the rebuilds have been at least partially written by the seat of his pants, and changed probably hundreds of times over the 14-year release schedule? Almost definitely. Is that bad? Narratively, yes. But emotionally? It was this bizarre window to Anno himself. Giguk in his 4.0 video talked about this being something only the present Anno could write. That the hope on show available in the present versions was the hope of a man who hadn't yet attained, in the previous versions, was the hope of a man who hadn't yet attained what he sought. So then I'm the problem, right? Rather than letting go of media or Evangelion, I'm having a media renaissance. After being made, let's say, redundant due to a certain global pandemic, I've started watching more classic anime at a faster rate than ever before. I'm rewatching Western shows and enjoying new ones. I finally got back into reading and I'm loving Eye of the World while listening to a great audiobook of All Quiet on the Western Front. And at long last I started writing down my thoughts in the form of these rudimentary reviews. So then it's me. I'm doing the opposite of letting go. I'd like to say that I'm different, that this isn't escapism, that I can move on any time, as it were, but just saying that makes me doubt whether or not it is just that. Some underlying addiction I haven't even aware of. Further, I have little interest in a partner right now. Maybe one day that will change, but I actually quite like not being in that sort of relationship. But then, is that just an excuse too? Am I just jealous that Anno had his waifu or life partner fall into his lap? That he's moved past Evangelion and reached some degree of self-fulfillment? That he's no longer the man he was that we all resonated with? Can I not get 3.0 plus 1.0 simply because it's outside of my frame of reference? I get NGE because what it feels like to be existentially depressed. And I know that burning anger, confusion, rage, and sad loneliness that's etched firmly into End of Ava's very being and soul. But maybe I just don't understand what it truly means to move on, to form that sort of bond and leave anime or escapist media in general far behind me. So maybe I am just a whiny internet-dwelling closet otaku who should go outside and touch some damn grass. And yet, maybe you were just glad the nearly 26-year wait for the final ending was done. The pure cathartic release at long last. Or maybe you'd subconsciously, or actively for that matter, been seeking for closure all this time. And I get all of that, I really do. But I wanted Anno to be able to finish with a bang, for the fights to mean something, for the characters to feel like people, and for me to be able to love it emotionally and objectively. I didn't want the payoff to come at the cost of any real objective narrative values, and for all the prior character depth to go away. I didn't want it for its depictions to be actively fighting its own source material and clashing with pre-established and the much-beloved order. Is the message really just keep your mind open for change that will make it all okay? Is that really the best you can do for the next generation, Anno? You helped the last so much, that's all you've got this time. What about all those we lost along the way? What about those who needed their fantasies just to make things okay? To make the pain more bearable or the world a little kinder? What about those who died unhappy or took their own lives? To the millions who just died in a global pandemic? What sort of message in this climate is it to send that when you need your short escapes the most, it wants you to go be free? Of course, Anno couldn't have predicted the timing of the film's release, and far be it for me to say otherwise. But is this really it? Do I simply need to wait until I have the right experiences before I can relate, before I like this movie? Ava's original message was not that art and escapism are bad, but that they need to be enjoyed in moderation, to be seen and appreciated, but not relied upon. Not as an escape from life or reality itself. that art must never be a recession to the womb. That was a message that's always resonated with me a whole lot. It acted as a big inspiration, in a sense, for a lot of things in my life, and I've frequently seen others say similar across the interwebs. But now it feels as though the message is, and always has been, to simply let go of all attachments to the fictional. To completely let Ava go. But was that ever the point, and why? Why is my love of this show labelled a curse? Does it really need to be goodbye forever? Wasn't the point that we should spread our own wings, make our own stories, and pursue our own passions? Not to dispense with everything that got us where we are. This, for me, doesn't feel like a farewell ending, but a self-congratulatory This, for me, doesn't feel like a farewell ending, but a self-congratulatory graduation ceremony. But an age of a coming of what? Exactly. As Ava Monkey said in his video on the movie, I wanted to like this. I really want to love this. Maybe that's part of the problem. And I get all the adoration, I really do. This is without a doubt art, that I'm sure of. I'll never completely get it, no matter how many rewatches I go through, all the symbolism, the hidden things. That's what makes it so hard to judge in objectives. My creed is to judge, understand, and see things from their own perspectives and viewpoints, to grade them based on how well they achieve their own goals. And in that sense, 3.0 plus 1.0 succeeds entirely at both being an expression of an older Anno and as the ending he envisioned, this time around at least. Conclusion. Would you give a 1 to 10 score to the Mona Lisa? So what more is there to say? I fear this essay may come across as overly antagonistic towards the film, and maybe that's the truth of it. Maybe I'll continue to grow resentful of this as time passes, to come to hate it and give it some arbitrary low score. Well, because of Mal, I've already had to give it a score. But as it stands, I really ain't sure. How does one grade someone else's feelings? Or more importantly, what do I do with those feelings, emotions, and expressions? I didn't exactly ask for them, but neither did I shy away from them. The feelings of a Anno who's now a rich, successful, married person who can turn up to work, once in a couple of months and be lauded as a hero for doing so. That's very different to most of us. Most of us struggle to find people who love us unconditionally. But at the same time, that is still his expression. It's no less invalid because it's uncommon. And maybe the film is right. Just like the two ends before it, life may be as simple as saying that it's time to move on with your life and find someone or something new to share it with. It's time to grow up. It's certainly a wordy sounding message to spread. I don't know how my feelings will change with time. Maybe this is the end of my time with Ava. Or perhaps further rewatches will completely recontextualize it all over again. I still need to read the manga adaptation too, which apparently goes a whole other route for itself. My apologies if this review felt more scattered than normal. With something so almost ethereal, it's hard to describe the good and the bad with any degree of lucidity. I hope you could at least empathise with a little of what I've said. If so, please press the like button. And thanks for reading. See you later, Evangelion.